The pacification of Manchukuo was a campaign to pacify the resistance to the newly established puppet state of Manchukuo between the anti-Japanese, the volunteer armies of Manchuria, and later the Communist Northeast Anti-Japanese United Army and the Imperial Japanese Army, and the forces of the Manchukuo government during the Second Sino-Japanese War, which took place from March 1932 until 1941, which resulted in a Japanese victory. Japan seizes control. The earliest formation of large anti-Japanese partisan groups occurred in Liaoning and Kirin provinces due to the poor performance of the Fengshan Army in the first month of the Japanese invasion of Manchuria, and to Japan's rapid success in removing and replacing the provincial authority in Fengshan and Kirin. The provincial government of Liaoning province had fled west to Chincha. Governor Zhang Shi remained in Mukden, but refused to cooperate with the Japanese in establishing a separatist and collaborationist government and was imprisoned. The Kwantung Army issued a proclamation on the 21st of September 1931 installing Colonel Kenji Doihara as mayor of Mukden. He proceeded to rule the city with the aid of an emergency committee composed mostly of Japanese. On the 23rd of September 1931, Lieutenant General Shi Qia of the Kirin Army was invited by the Japanese to form a provisional government for Kirin province. In Kirin, the Japanese succeeded in achieving a bloodless occupation of the capital. General Shi Qia issued a proclamation on the 30th of September, declaring the province independent of the Republic of China under protection of the Japanese Army. On the 24th of September 1931, a provisional government was formed in Fengshan with Yuan Qinhai as chairman of the Committee for the Maintenance of Peace and Order. In Harbin, General Chang Qinghui also called a conference on the 27th of September 1931 to discuss the organization of an emergency committee of the Special District, formed to achieve the secession of Harbin from China. However, he was not able to act as much of the area surrounding Harbin was still held by anti-Japanese militias under Generals Ting Chao, Li Du, Feng Zhanhai and others. Meanwhile, in Mukden, the Northeastern Administrative Committee or Self-Government Guiding Board was set up on November 10, under the leadership of Yu Chenghan, a prominent elder statesman of Shangzu Lang's government, who favored the autonomy of Manchuria. After the Japanese defeated General Marsh Ashan and occupied Sidsihar on the 19th of November 1931, a local self-government association was established in Heilongjiang province, and General Chang Qinghui was inaugurated as governor of the province on the 1st of January 1932. After the fall of Qinchao, the independence movement made rapid progress in northern Manchuria, where Colonel Doihara was chief of special services in Harbin. General Chang Qinghui, upon learning of the defeat of Marshal Zhang Zuliang at Qinchao, agreed to the request of the Self-Government Guiding Board at Mukden and declared the independence of Heilongjiang province on the 7th of January 1932. After General Marsh Ashan had been driven from Sidsihar by the Japanese in the Jiangqiao campaign, he had retreated northeastward with his beaten and depleted forces and had set up his capital at Heilin. There he attempted to continue to govern Heilongjiang province. Colonel Kenji Doihara began negotiations with General Ma from his special service office at Harbin, hoping to get him to join the new state of Manchukuo Japan was organizing. Ma continued negotiating with Doihara while he continued to support General Ting Chao. Early resistance, militias, brotherhoods and bandits. The emergence of Chinese resistance to the Japanese occupation of Manchuria in the form of citizen militias, peasant brotherhoods and bandit gangs was facilitated by Japan's success in rapidly destroying Zhang Zulang's government in the region. Most of the Kwantung Army's strength during November 1931 was concentrated against General Marsh Ashan in north-central Heilongjiang, and in December and early January against Zhang Zulang's remaining army in Qinchao in southwestern Liaoning. Away from the Japanese garrisons in cities and along the railroads, resistance units mustered openly and relatively free from molestation in late 1931 and early 1932. Militias. The frontier status of Manchuria, with endemic banditry and activities by opposing warlords, led leading citizens and village authorities to form private militias for the protection of the property and land holdings even before the Japanese invasion of Manchuria. After the start of the Japanese occupation, these militias became partisan bands often known as plainclothes men from the lack of uniforms, and styled themselves with various names such as the Self-Protection Militia, Anti-Japanese Militia, or Chinese Volunteers. One of the first such forces to form, called the Courageous Citizens Militia, had been established by November 1931 near the estuary port of Qinchao. These militias operated principally in southern Fengshan, which had half of Manchuria's population and the highest proportion of Han Chinese. Fengshan had come almost immediately under Japanese control, as most population centers and its capital of Mukden all lay along the tracks of the South Manchuria Railway in the SMR zone, which had been garrisoned by Kwantung Army troops since long before the conflict. Peasant brotherhoods. Peasant brotherhoods were a traditional form of mutual protection by Chinese smallholders and tenant farmer. Waves of immigrants fleeing the wars of the warlord era that ravaged north and central China came to Manchuria since 1926 at the rate of 1 million a year. These included many peasants belonging to the two predominant brotherhoods, the Red Spear Society and the Big Sword Society, which aided the immigrants in establishing themselves and provided for protection against both bandits and rapacious landlords. The Red Spear Society was strongest in the hinterlands of Fengshan and countryside around Harbin. The Big Sword Society predominated in southeastern Kirin and adjoining parts of Fengshan. In 1927, the Big Swords had spearheaded an uprising triggered by the collapse of the prevailing Fenpio paper currency. During the rebellion, the Big Swords were respected by the peasants because they did not harm or plunder the common people, but resisted the officials of the warlord Zhang Zulin. After the Japanese invasion, the Big Swords Society disturbed the Qiantao district in southeast Fengshan along the Korean border, and rose en masse in response to the declaration of Manchukuo on March 9, 1932. The Big Swords became the principal component of partisan resistance in this region, forming loose ties with the anti-Japanese volunteer armies. The bandit leader Lao Pai-fang commanded several bands of Big Swords in western Fengshan. The Big Swords in southeast Kirin were allied with Wang Delin, and General Feng Zhanhai organized and trained a Big Sword Corps of 4,000 men. The Red Spear Society groups were more widespread. Members formed important centers of resistance as the war spread out through the countryside. Red Spears frequently attacked the SMR zone from the Shanlintan and Tungfeng districts close to Mukden and the Fushun coal mines. They were led by a young officer of the Fengshan Army, Tang Juwu. Red Spear Society units displayed extraordinary staying power in this area almost 2 years after the Mukden incident. A group of 1,000 Red Spear members stormed the Tungfeng prefecture near Mukden on June 3, 1933, long after the large volunteer armies had been defeated. However, both the Red Spear Society and the Big Sword Society were made up largely of uneducated and poorly trained peasants, and had a traditionalist, quasi-religious character. Members of the Brotherhoods placed their faith in rustic magic and belief in the righteous character's heavenly reward. Big Sword members claimed that the spells made them immune to bullets. Red Spear bands were in many cases led by Buddhist monks as they went into battle, with their clothes and weapons decorated with magic inscriptions similar to that of the earlier Boxer Society. Bandits. Northeastern China was a poorly governed frontier area at the turn of the 20th century, and banditry was endemic. Some were hardened criminals who pillaged for a living, others were part-time bandits who robbed only to survive when crops failed and they could not make a living on the land. As the population of Manchuria increased through the 1920s, some newcomers became squatters, then wanderers, and then outlaws. Even the settled Fengshan province, bandits known as Hunhutsa were common along the piping Mukden Railway and in the wooded southeast of the province along the Mukden-Antung Railway near Korea. Powerful bandit gangs operated within a day's march of such major cities as Mukden and Harbin. The term Shanlin was often used to describe the bandits because they knew the local terrain very well. Most operated in a fairly small area and maintained the goodwill of local peasants. Government troops had great difficulty in suppressing them, as would the Japanese and Manchukuo forces in later years. There was also a tradition of nationalistic banditry, dating back to the Russian invasion in July 1900, when Tsarist forces were sent to Manchuria, ostensibly to protect the Russian-owned Chinese Eastern Railway after the Boxer Rebellion. Wang Delin, who opposed both the Russians and the Qing dynasty, led a major bandit force against the Russians. His career as an outlaw continued until 1917, when he agreed to join the Jilin provincial forces. For former bandits to join the regular army quite common in the warlord era, as the bandits formed a convenient source of new soldiers. The converse was true as well, as the Fengshan army retreated from the Japanese onslaught. Thousands of soldiers deserted into the countryside to resume the former careers as bandits. During the Russo-Japanese War, many bandit groups actively cooperated with the Japanese army, providing valuable military intelligence on Russian troop movements and deployment, and assisting in the securing of supplies. After December 1931, the Japanese army began operations for the clearance of bandits into the Fengshan countryside beyond the South Manchuria, a railway zone in counties west of Mukden, largely due to repeated bandit attacks, robberies and kidnappings on the Dali and Mukden trains. Fighting supported by aircraft reportedly broke up several of the bandit gangs. In consequence, bandits now resented the Japanese invasion, and began retaliatory attacks against isolated Japanese communities along the Mukden-Antung Railway. Hunhutsa chieftain Lao Bai-Fang led several thousand followers to attack the southern portion of the SMR main line. The Japanese garrison of New Chuangchang was encircled and attacked by 1,500 Chinese bandits under Lao Bai-Fang, while other troops under his orders attacked in the Haicheng area. Japanese reinforcements quickly dispatched from Mukden forced Lao's retirement, but Lao Bai-Fang re-emerged later as a volunteer army general, and was acclaimed as commander by both local peasant brotherhoods and anti-Japanese militias. Many bandits were admitted into the volunteer armies as the Japanese conquest advanced and the partisan resistance became an increasingly popular cause. Some professional national bandits such as Old North Wind Zhang Haitian led the followers against Japan, but just as often continued to loot villages along the railway. Formation of the anti-Japanese volunteer armies. Resistance in Harbin. When General Shi Qia of the Kirin Army declared the province independent of the Republic of China, military and civil authorities in the province fractured into New Kirin adherents of his regime and loyalist Old Kirin elements in opposition to it, the former predominated near the capital and the latter predominating in Harbin and the rugged hinterland to the north and east. Hostilities did not commence in the Harbin area until the end of January 1932, at about the same time as the January 28 incident. General Ting Chao decided to defend the city, a key hub of rail and river communications in the north, against the approach of first General Shi Qia's New Kirin Army and then Japanese troops. He appealed to Harbin's Chinese residents to join his railway garrison. Regulars and hundreds of volunteers joined the Jilin Self-Defense Army, the defensive Harbin at the start of February, that rallied Harbin in the way that he had already formed militias in Fengshan, convinced local authorities and leading citizens in the hinterlands of Kirin that they should resist Japan's occupation of the province and form their own bands and militia units. General Ting Chao's beaten Jilin Self-Defense Army retired from Harbin to the northeast down the Sungari River, to join the lower Sungari garrison of General Li Du to form the nucleus of armed opposition in North Kirin. Meanwhile, in southeast Kirin, Wang Delin, a battalion commander and former bandit chieftain in the region, established the Chinese People's National Salvation Army, or NSA, on February 8, 1932, numbering over 1,000 men at the time. Within a few months this army became a rallying point for resistance and one of the most successful of the volunteer armies. Foundation of Manchukuo. With General Ting Chao defeated, Maj Ashan agreed to defect to the new Manchukuo Imperial Army on the 14th of February 1932 and retained his post as governor of Heilongjiang Province in exchange for cooperating with the Japanese. On February 27, 1932, General Ting Chao offered to cease hostilities, ending official Chinese resistance in Manchuria. Within days, Henry Pui, Manchurian former emperor of China, deposed in 1911, was made provisional president of the independent state of Manchukuo by the resolution of an all-Manchuria convention at Nukten, whose members included General Maj Ashan, flown in from the north. The next day, on March 1, the Provisional Manchukuo government was established with Maj Ashan as its Minister of War, in addition to his post as provincial governor. On March 9, the state of Manchukuo was inaugurated. The Chinese government announced that not only did it not recognize the new state, but that asserted that Pui had been kidnapped by the Japanese. Despite the end of official resistance with the defeat of General Ting Chao, all was not calm in Manchuria. In late February, General Wang Delin with 1,000 militia wrecked or burned 18 bridges on the Kirin-Tunhua Railway. Wang also recaptured the town of Dunhua on February 20. In March 1932, a Japanese and Manchukuo expeditionary force sent against Wang was defeated in a series of battles around the shore of Lake Jingbo, losing hundreds of casualties. These battles were small in scale, with the militias using the knowledge of the local terrain to set ambushes, eventually compelling the Japanese to retreat to Harbin. That the Japanese had suffered a military defeat at the hands of a motley collection of irregular forces was a considerable political embarrassment. Japan was anxious to present Manchukuo to the world as a peaceful nation, especially as a League of Nations delegation was now investigating the situation. When the news of the victories of Wang's Chinese People's National Salvation Army spread around eastern Kirin, hundreds of troops who had had been reluctant members of the new Manchukuo Imperial Army, defected to the NSA, and estimates of its total strength in April rose from 4,500 to above 10,000 and possibly nearer 15,000, organized in 5 brigades.